Hello everyone and welcome back to the Chris Talks Football Podcast. This is episode number 19, then getting ever closer to that episode number 20. But yeah, episode number 19 of this week's football podcast, and today obviously we're going to be talking about the Premier League match day number 21 that happened obviously on New Year's Day and of course on the 2nd of January. And of course we'll be talking about the FA Cup, which has happened for the most part of this weekend, so obviously we'll stay tuned into that. Also some of the major footballing stories in Europe as well, the transfer talks that could be happening, as of course this is the second New Year's podcast, which means that the January transfer window is well open, and of course rumours with who clubs are going to sign in the next couple of weeks will obviously be right at the top. So we'll see obviously what team is looking to sign what players. So then, before we get to the FA Cup, of course, matchday 21 of the Premier League happened this weekend, and it's safe to say that really it does look like Liverpool are really looking for their first league title in 30 years, strengthening that grip on top spot. Of course, they're still 13 points behind Leicester and, of course, 14 behind Manchester City as they've been in the last couple of weeks. But their 2-0 win against Sheffield United really encompassed all of the credentials that Liverpool have to be title challengers again. Of course, it's the attacking prowess that Liverpool are really, really good at. And even though, of course, they put their first team out against Sheffield United, that got the job done, they're still, of course, unbeaten in the Premier League. Still had time to put out pretty much most of their kids out, their academy team, pretty much out against Everton in the FA Cup for the Merseyside derby that happened yesterday. And they still got a victory, 1-0. And that was thanks to a really good goal from Curtis Jones, curling home from about 20 yards, so really good for him. Of course, Curtis Jones, who also scored the winning penalty in the EFL Cup penalty shootout in which they beat Arsenal in a couple of months ago. So really good for the young man. He could maybe make a claim for Jurgen Klopp's starting 11 in the next few months, maybe if an injury occurs to one of the front three, because he is looking like a really exciting prospect. And that's what the FA Cup does, of course. It gives us gives us players that could be exciting talents in the near future. We'll touch on that a little bit more. Liverpool, though, back to the Premier League, they obviously look relentless, and I feel like I've touched on Liverpool and why they're going to win the league this season enough. They've got really good. It was really two of the best defences in the league going head to head. Of course, we had Sheffield United and Liverpool. Of course, Sheffield United had the third best defensive record, and of course, against Liverpool, you kind of would tell that Sheffield United can try their best not to concede, but of course they would concede eventually, and that's what they've done. They conceded 2 goals. And Liverpool now just looking absolutely unstoppable. Now, it's, of course, a whole calendar year in which they are now unbeaten in all of their games, in all competitions, in their domestic competitions. They're unbeaten at home. But, yeah, really good to see that, obviously, Liverpool have gone over a year unbeaten at home. Very good stuff. But you could say for Sheffield United, that was an opportunity to close up on the top 5 missed there. Even though, if you looked at when the two sides met at the last time at Bramall Lane, you'd think that maybe Sheffield United could have been in with a chance, considering that they did play a really good game at the start of the season at Bramall Lane. But it is what it is. Sheffield United can't do it anymore. They're still 2 points behind behind Manchester United in 5th place. But Sheffield United now have not won in their past 3 Premier League games after that little run that they went on. So yeah, Sheffield United, after what seemed as a really good push maybe for the top half of the table, might be slipping out a little bit. Of course, they are possibly looking to sign Liverpool striker Ryan Brewster on loan. Also, they maybe look to bring in some other players in the transfer window. I'm not too sure who, though, because their activity in the transfer window hasn't been very good. Liverpool, however, gave a debut to new signing Takumi Minamino against Everton in the Cup yesterday, and he did look alright, I think, in the latter stages of the first half. I think that was when he was at his best. Of course, it is the FA Cup, so he's not really going to be judged on there. Of course, he's going to be making his league debut maybe sometime in the month, so of course we'll have to see what that is. Mane, Salah and Firmino were rested in the cup tie, which is why Minamino made his debut. Of course, Divock Origi was playing in that game as well against Everton. And for the most part, they really looked good, Liverpool. And, Everton did field a very strong team. It had the likes of Calvert-Lewin, who's been flourishing under Ancelotti. It had the likes of, who else? Theo Walcott, Schneiderlin, Pickford as well, Mina. So a lot of their first team regulars are on the bench as well. Despite Liverpool having Mane and, I believe, Firmino on the bench as well, they still won. And that was their good team spirit. Liverpool's academy has slowly over the past year really been one of the top academies in the country. I mean, they weren't really producing a lot in terms of course, they produced Trent Alexander-Arnold, which in itself is very good, but, even him and the likes of Joe Gomez were the only real academy trio, were the only real academy graduates in that side. But over time we will probably see people like Curtis Jones, like Nico Williams, who was playing fullback instead of Trent Alexander-Arnold. We could see people like them playing in the near future. Adrian as well, who was standing in of course for Alisson in the cup, made some really key saves. So yeah, it was a really good victory for Liverpool. But for Everton, the problems do mount for them. Ancelotti's first league defeat occurred against Manchester City in the Premier League. 2-1 defeat to them. Manchester City, of course, still trying to keep up pace with Leicester and have pulled away from Chelsea pretty much now, especially after Chelsea drew 1-0 with Brighton. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, Everton now, I know everyone has sort of written off Ancelotti, saying, he shouldn't be there. I mean, this man has won, 2 Champions Leagues. He's managed the biggest clubs in world football: AC Milan, Napoli, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain. He's managed them all, Chelsea. So, yeah, he should not really be rocking up at Everton. But obviously, I did talk about Calvert-Lewin, and he had a big chance against Liverpool. But you really have to say that maybe this could be the start of Ancelotti's downfall. I did recommend that Everton may go for another new manager, not just Ancelotti, because he's too good for Everton. He just is. I mean, Everton have never played Champions League football, and Ancelotti has, but it depends. I mean, is this going to be the start of Everton's downfall? Well, two wins in the past 5, of course, both coming under Carlo Ancelotti, would be quite encouraging, and of course they're close to the top half of the table, so maybe food for thought for Ancelotti. But speaking of Chelsea, they look like they're probably going to be in 4th place. They've been inconsistent in the last few games. Their home form in the last few weeks hasn't really been good. Of course, lost to Bournemouth, lost to Southampton in the Christmas period as well. And they drew away from home at Brighton. Now, it's 2 wins in their past 5. And, yeah, I think that now Brighton are really starting to show a little bit of heart now. They won and drew their last game. Brighton, of course, beat Bournemouth in a very big match between the two, as they could be battling out for relegation if you look on where they are on the league table. But yeah, really, really good to see that obviously Brighton have done well. And of course, Ali Reza Yakinbash, who was a £17 million signing a year or 2 ago from the Eredivisie, didn't score a single goal before the last couple of weeks, and he scored one of the goals of the season, a brilliant overhead kick against Chelsea, and that was absolutely brilliant. After, of course, Willian, I believe, put Chelsea ahead, a great goal for them. But of course, Chelsea beat Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup as well by 2-0, and of course that means that they are into the 4th round of the FA Cup once again. Of course, Chelsea have had a lot of opposition from the Championship and from Leagues 1 or 2 in the past couple of seasons, of course, and it really does look like Chelsea could maybe try and focus on the FA Cup, because it's brilliant competition. The FA Cup really is. I really do think that Chelsea should now start to probably go for the FA Cup, because of course we have seen that, ever since Conte won the FA Cup with Chelsea, they haven't really gone that far into the stages. But maybe Lampard could try and experiment with this Chelsea team, of course, with the transfer ban. They have been linked with a lot of players, though. They have been obviously linked with Wilfried Zaha over the past couple of weeks. Do I think that's going to happen? It depends, really. Is Wilfried Zaha willing to sort of take the risk? Because of course, Lampard does have a lot of faith in these youngsters, and yeah, it does. It obviously really is. It's good for Zaha to move to a top 6 club because, of course, he's not getting any younger, and of course, Zaha belongs in the top 6 club. But whether that really will shape his thoughts of going to Chelsea, it depends, because I think that Lampard is very happy with the squad that he has now. I think that Zaha, of course, would be a really good addition and would be good squad depth, but it really does depend on whether, of course, he's going to be at least matching his price tag. Also, they're looking to sign David Alaba, the Bayern Munich left back. He doesn't really have a lot on his contract. I believe he has just over a year of his contract. And of course, he's looking to sign a new forward. Of course, all the speculation about Giroud. And Flamengo and their striker, Gabriel Barbosa, who's actually on loan from Inter Milan, he's looking to him to try and fill the void that Giroud would be. But it's also really good to see that, of course, Chelsea are looking outside of Europe, because Gabriel Barbosa is the top scorer in the Brazilian league, and of course he's still young, 23, and he played in the Club World Cup final against Liverpool. But for Brighton, they may be looking to sign a few players. There has been a little bit of speculation they may take Danny Drinkwater back on loan, because of course he's on loan currently at Burnley, but of course he hasn't really done anything there, so maybe he'll look to loan him to Brighton. But it'll be really interesting to see what Chelsea do. Also, of course, Leicester, absolutely brilliant performance against Newcastle United, beating them 3-0, and of course Leicester beat Wigan Athletic 2-0 in the Cup. So good times for Leicester. They've only conceded they haven't conceded, in fact, in this whole entire week. So clean sheets all round at the start of 2020 for Leicester, which is very, very good to see. Hamza Chowdhury and James Maddison, two of their most outstanding performers this season, and you could say last season if you're talking about Hamza Chowdhury. They scored absolutely cracking goals, but for Newcastle the problems just mount. Can't score at home. Joe Linton has been one of the flops of the decade, you have to say. I mean, I really haven't seen a worse flop from a player in his first ever season. I really cannot think. I'm not too sure, but yeah. And of course, Rochdale drew with Newcastle in the Cup, and Aaron Wilbraham, 40 years old. He's only 5 years younger than my father, and he has scored against Newcastle in the Cup. So yeah, that's absolute madness. And obviously a lot of questions were asked about Steve Bruce, and of course rightly so, because Rochdale have taken them to a replay at St James's Park. But Newcastle United, I thought were going to be a little bit stable. Of course, they're still stable, but they've lost 4 out of their last 5. That's not very good for Newcastle, and they are starting to become under a little bit of pressure now. They're only 5 points from safety, and they really need to do some business. They need to bring in a striker in the January transfer window. Of course, they are probably looking to try and play Dwight Gale, but Dwight Gale has been attracting interest from some championship clubs, and of course they want Giroud on loan Newcastle for the rest of the season, which is, well, not too bad. In fact, I think Giroud, of course, is a very experienced player. Of course, played for Arsenal and for Chelsea, and don't forget, he has actually won a league before, and that was in France with Lille, I believe, or Montpellier. I'm not too sure about that one. So he knows how to win leagues, even though it is in France. But they need to bring in a replacement striker, because Joe Linton really isn't happening. Sam Maximan, of course, that's a real blow not having him. Newcastle really are going to struggle in January. Of course, good result for Rochdale, but still, I think that it's going to be a really big struggle for Newcastle if they can't sign a half-decent striker, which they need. Andy Carroll, of course, returning to the club. He hasn't scored, I believe, yet so far, so they need a replacement quick. But Leicester, they're doing really, really well, and I don't think they really have any plans for anyone. In fact, Leicester are looking to sign Juventus centre-back Meri Demiral, the Turkish 21-year-old, who actually is looking pretty decent, I have to say. He'd be a really good addition, I think, but he probably would be brought in as a backup to the likes of Soyuncu if he gets injured, or maybe even as a replacement for Johnny Evans, we don't know. But yeah, hopefully in the future, I do plan to make a video on deadline day, just after, or maybe when the transfer deadline day is being conducted. So, of course, we'll have a look at that. But another form team, one of the form teams of the division, Watford. Nigel Pearson has absolutely transformed Watford's survival credentials. Let's just ignore the fact that they did concede 3 goals to a team that was in the conference little over 2 years ago. Let's just ignore that. Pretend that didn't happen. Watford threw a 3-0 lead against Tranmere Rovers away. That's absolute madness. I don't really know. But I don't think Nigel Pearson will give 2 shits, to be fair. I think he's done absolutely brilliant to keep Watford in the Premier League. And a remake of the FA Cup semi-final, in which Watford won last season. They beat Wolves again by 2-1. And Troy Deeney is back from injury. We knew that for quite a while, in fact. And he is really flourishing. The likes of Ismaila Sarr is doing absolute bits for Watford as well. Also, Gerard Deulofeu is starting to score a lot of goals for them, and Watford really are looking. They're only 2 points from safety. If you told me when they were stuck on 9 points at the start of the month, I would have said to you, it's not happening. They were on 9 points, but they've got 10 points out of a possible 12. They are probably the second most informed team in the Premier League, joint with Southampton. Southampton also doing really well. They've taken 10 points out of their last 12 as well. A brilliant victory against Jose Mourinho's Tottenham. And Tottenham, of course, were held in the cup by Middlesbrough. So Mourinho needs to start to get his act together now, because he's losing touch with the top 4. And I thought Tottenham would make the top 4, obviously, at the start of the season. So he really needs to do something about that, because 2 wins in their past 6 games now, Spurs, in all competitions. So he really doesn't want to exit out of the FA Cup, because maybe the FA Cup may be one of only 2 chances to get European football. Spurs are becoming a little bit complacent now. Of course, Harry Kane pulled up injured against Southampton after he had the goal disallowed for offside. That's going to be a massive blow with this hamstring going, Harry Kane, because he's pretty much one of the only few sources of goals. You could say Lucas Moura or Lamela. Obviously, the main transfer saga with Spurs is between them and Christian Eriksen. Now, Christian Eriksen is up of his contract this year, and of course Inter Milan want to take him for 20 million euros in this window. Would that be a brilliant signing? I think it is. I think Antonio Conte has revived Inter Milan. I mean, the last few seasons, it hasn't really been the Inter Milan of old, you know, when they were under Jose Mourinho, and when they won the treble, and when they were one of Europe's big powerhouses. Don't get me wrong, they still are now, but they haven't got the same, stature as they had maybe 10 years ago with the likes of Cambiasso, Wesley Sneijder. For anyone who played early FIFAs of the decade, FIFAs 10, 11, 12, 13, you would have seen what a beast that Inter Milan were in those days. But obviously the main saga for Tottenham is Christian Eriksen. They don't want to let him go for free, obviously, the owners, but they have to keep him. He's a really influential midfielder. He's 27, he still has a bit of time in, but I don't know what Spurs will do. Obviously, they are linked with Hakim Ziyech, as are their North London rivals Arsenal, but I don't think Hakim Ziyech would go to Spurs, personally. I really do think that I think he'll stay with Ajax or maybe even go to a bigger club, but I don't know. I really don't know what Spurs are thinking of doing in the transfer window. Jan Vertonghen as well, he might go maybe back to Ajax or maybe even to Italy with Napoli. There are some interest taken in him. Yeah, but for Tottenham, they need something. They need a decent centre-back, and they probably need a backup striker for Harry Kane, as he's injured now. So yeah, it's interesting times for Spurs and how they deal with the transfer window. But for Southampton, they've done pretty well. Danny Ings, could he maybe be an outside shot for the England squad at Euro 2020? or maybe the England squad for these upcoming friendlies that England have before Euro 2020 in the next month or two. Because he is one of the most informed strikers in the Premier League right now. I think he's up to 13 goals this season, 12, 13 goals. And that's how much he got for Burnley when they went down in 14-15. So, and he's got time ahead of him as well this season. He's really bounced back, because I remember when he left Burnley to go to Liverpool in his first season, he got literally no playing time. And of course injuries. I thought this is the end of Danny Ings' career. But no, he's one of the best English strikers right now performing in the Premier League. So fair play to him. He's done really well. But Southampton, of course, looking to probably shore up their defence. They've been linked with a few players, of course. They've been linked with Johnny Evans as well as Craig Cathcart as well. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what Hasenhüttl's going to do in the transfer window, but hopefully it's something good. Aston Villa absolutely needed a victory that lifts them out of the relegation zone. They beat Burnley by 2-1. Burnley now have 3 straight defeats, so it's not really going well for them. Aston Villa, 2 wins out of their last 3, including 2 big ones against Norwich and against Burnley. Absolute brilliant times to get a victory. Because really, they have more defeats than Burnley. They have more defeats than Watford and of Bournemouth. They really shouldn't be doing that. But yeah, Aston Villa really, piling on the pressure of those above to win. And Aston Villa, I don't think are really linked with a lot of players in the transfer market. I don't think they really are. They've been linked with Scott Sinclair, a return to Aston Villa. Of course, Scott Sinclair now playing up at Celtic. They've been linked with a return to him. But I think with the amount that they've spent in the summer transfer window, almost 100 million or something, they won't do it. Wesley is out injured, so they might need to look for Scott Sinclair, because of course Jonathan Kodjia is the only striker that they have, and of course he played in the Cup with Fulham. Fulham absolutely rocketed to the 4th round. 2 brilliant goals from Harry Arter and from I believe it was Anthony Knocker. Yes, it was. So yeah, it's going to be really, really good to see what Aston Villa can do in the transfer market. Also, Burnley, of course, they've cancelled Danny Drinkwater's loan. They might need a midfielder now that Danny Drinkwater's gone. They've been linked with a few Championship midfielders, I believe. They've been linked with the likes of Harrison Reed, who I believe is on loan from Southampton. I'm not too sure about that, but yeah, Burnley really need to fix up, otherwise they're going to be in a relegation battle. So yeah, it's going to be quite testing for Burnley. Norwich and Crystal Palace played out a 1-1 draw. Crystal Palace looked to bring in 2 marquee striker signings, of course, because Benteke hasn't really got firing this season, and Jordan Ayew, even though he's scoring goals, it can't be a one-man team, if you know what I'm saying. And of course, they might need to replace Zaha for what I said about the Chelsea transfer saga. Now to the 2 key results in the Premier League. West Ham 4, Bournemouth 0. Brilliant return to West Ham for David Moyes, beating Bournemouth by 4-0. But for Bournemouth, it gets worse. They're in the relegation zone for the, I believe, a rare time. I think it's the first time ever since they were actually promoted up to the Premier League. I'm not too sure about that, but it's going to be a survival for Bournemouth now. They need a striker. Dominic Solanke, the big lump of useless meat up front, finally got his first goal against Luton Town. Congratulations. He'll probably stick that one to his fridge. But yeah, I mean, 20 million for Solanke and for Nathaniel Klein. I mean, no. I mean, are they really just going through Liverpool's rubbish bin? I mean, there's a reason why Solanke took 20 games to score a goal for Liverpool and took over a year to score for Bournemouth. I'm really not too sure, but yeah, Bournemouth need a striker, definitely, to supply with Callum Wilson, Josh King and Ryan Fraser. Philip Billing got his first goals for the club against Luton as well, but they do need a striker, Bournemouth. I'm really concerned about them. I think that the fairy tale that they have been on for the past half decade, if they don't invest well in the transfer window, could be about to end, I think. Eddie Howe, if Bournemouth get relegated this season, there are 2 options. Eddie Howe could be, persuaded by a big club, maybe a lucrative contract if they pay him the right amount, or he'll stay. Not too sure about that one. But for West Ham, good victory for West Ham, of course. I don't think they're planning to do a lot much. In fact, actually, they're planning to sign a loan deal for Gedson Fernandes, the Portuguese. And speaking of Gedson Fernandes, he's been pretty decent this season, chipping in with a few goals and assists, but I don't think West Ham will really need anyone. Mark Noble got on the score sheet, Sebastian Haller got on the score sheet as well against Bournemouth, and of course Pablo Fornals and Pablo Zabaleta, the two Pablos, scoring against Gillingham in the Cup yesterday. So that's really very good. They're in the 4th round. So yeah, interesting times for West Ham if they can pull away from that for that relegation zone. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because they're 2 points ahead and they're really in there. I mean, 11th place Everton and 15th place Burnley are separated by a point, so they could be in that little mid-table scrap in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, Arsenal, with probably the result of the Premier League weekend, beating Manchester United by 2-0 and giving Mikel Arteta his first victory as the Gunners boss. He did lose against Chelsea agonisingly. He has made an impact. I think, that obviously they're playing Leeds United in the Cup tonight, which will be quite interesting to see because Leeds, of course, are in the top 3 in the Championship. They're occupying the promotion places. But I really do think Arsenal now, well, even though I said Arteta wasn't the right coach for them because of his inexperience, he is bloody doing it well. But as I say that, again, it's like Solskjaer. He had a brilliant start with the club. 7 or 8 victories in a row, and of course getting United to the last 8 of the Champions League. But it could go down. Maybe Solskjaer's looking at a reflection of himself about 9 months ago when he had that amazing start as United boss. But obviously Arsenal, as ever, have been linked with their defence, despite them keeping a clean sheet against Manchester United at home, can I say. But yeah, Arsenal and Manchester United, 2 clubs that have linked with a lot of players, I think. Arsenal have been linked to Jerome Boateng. Now, my opinions on this is, it's a bit like the David Luiz saga. David Luiz is a great defender, as is Jerome Boateng. But he's 31, Boateng. David Luiz is a year older. I think that even though Boateng is class and is playing for one of the best football clubs in the world right now in Bayern Munich, I think they need to go for a young and more experienced defender. I think they can't keep going for over 30s because you look at, I would say in 3 or 4 years' time, Boateng would have been well past it. Surely he would be. But yeah, it's really going to be interesting who they sign. Of course, they're still linked with Zaha, and of course they're linked with Hakim Ziyech. And if Hakim Ziyech could go to Arsenal, it'd be brilliant. Definitely. It would be obviously a replacement for Mesut Ozil, who could be on his way out of the Emirates Stadium in this window. We don't know where, though. Another player who could be out at the end of this window could be Paul Pogba, of course. He's been linked with Real Madrid quite a lot as well, even with the return to Juventus, which seems very unlikely. Real Madrid seems very likely, though. But yeah, Pogba, of course, being linked with Real Madrid. 2 replacements are being set up to sign if Pogba does go to Real Madrid. James Maddison from Leicester and Bruno Fernandes from Sporting Lisbon. Of course, Fernandes is, I believe, 25, so he does have time. Maddison is, I believe, 2 or 3 years younger, so maybe it's good to invest in Maddison. Of course, they have been linked with a striker in the transfer window, of course. Danny Olmo is not a striker, Chris. He's not a striker. He's an attacking midfielder. But, yeah. I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of Danny Olmo this season. I mean, I know he's Spanish. I know he's a really exciting prospect, but I haven't really seen a lot of him, so I'm not too sure about that one. But Manchester United need really good players. Of course, they've been linked with Toby Alderweireld and Koulibaly, but yeah, they need to try and sign Fernandes. I mean, all the speculation, it's happened since 2019, January. They've been looking to sign, bringing Wilfried Zaha back, Fernandes. They need to try and bring him back. And of course, Manchester United did progress in the Cup, I believe. But yeah, as I check, of course, they really need to sign Fernandes. Otherwise, it's just not really going to happen for them. Like, they're not really going to shape up their defence. No, in fact, Manchester United played a boring 0-0 draw with the Wolves. They did not have an entire shot on target. in the Wolves goal, Manchester United. And Wolves, of course, are the big bogey club for both Manchester clubs, City and United, of course. United last season, City this season. So, yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens to them. But they need reinforcements. As for Arsenal, of course, Hakim Ziyech, I don't really know where Mesut Ozil could go. I'm not really too sure, but it does look like he's on his way out, and Pogba is as well. And if I have to be honest, I don't think Paul Pogba has really fulfilled his potential, because this is where he's supposed to be in his prime. Paul Pogba at Manchester United. He's the right age, right price tag, but he hasn't delivered. I mean, Pogba is, I believe, 27 or 28. I'm not too sure. But this is his prime. He should not be, falling out with Solskjaer or trying to submit transfer requests. He shouldn't. But, it is what it is. And I think that could be really big to see what could happen to Pogba, because he is obviously a great player, world champion, of course, with France. But it depends what happens. Right, into the Championship then, of course. We've had the Championship. Meanwhile, the Premier League has been going on in New Year's Day, and the big result so far, Stoke City 5, Huddersfield Town 2. Of course, Stoke look to stay up, as are Huddersfield. Huddersfield are likely to stay up as well. QPR absolutely thrashing Cardiff 6-1. QPR looking like they could be outside playoff contender, and of course the big game with West Brom and Leeds, top two in the Championship, they played out a 1-1 draw, and also Fulham's promotion credentials hit a blow, of course, after they lost to Reading. And Brentford looked like a solid little team, they're third in the league, and if Brentford get promoted this season, I honestly don't know the meaning of life, because Brentford were in League One 4 years ago. I don't know. I really don't know. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to them. Hopefully, it can maybe turn around for Bristol City, who are, of course, themselves looking to go up. But it depends what's going to happen, though. Of course, Preston, their playoff ambitions were a blow as well after they lost to Middlesbrough, but I think they'll be back, Preston. They have a really good squad. Preston, of course, were knocked out of the Cup by Norwich City by 4-2. Teenage striker Adam Idah for Norwich, 18 years old. Look out for him. He might be one for the future for Norwich City. He scored a hat-trick, including a 40-yard strike, which was very good. And if any of you's watched that, you would have known. So that was a really good effort from him. Into the Football League, of course, had fixtures during the time the FA Cup has gone on. There was only one match in League One, and Sunderland, who look to be promoted this season but are struggling a little bit, they beat Lincoln City 3-1. Of course, in League Two, the main real results in League Two was that Swindon and Bradford, the top two, I believe, in League Two, they played out a 1-1 draw. Wickham are still leading the way in League One after drawing with Ipswich on New Year's Day. And of course, in League Two, it does look like Stevenage and Morecambe might be the teams that are battling it out for relegation then as well. Swindon Town also keeping their unbeaten record, but West Brom and Leeds do look like the two teams that are going to go up in the Championship. Leeds United, I didn't expect. I thought it would be West Brom, Fulham and Cardiff that would go back up. But it is what it is. Of course, in the FA Cup, we've had a lot of results today. Probably the key games, of course, Rochdale and Newcastle. That was a shock there, holding them. Sheffield Wednesday of the Championship beating Brighton yesterday. Carlisle United flirting with the relegation zone in League Two. They held Cardiff City to a 2-2 draw. Also, Hartlepool United, one of only two non-league sides in the FA Cup, went out to Oxford. A brilliant goal by Shannon Baptiste to put Oxford in their place in the fourth round of the FA Cup. Southampton have two really good talents on show. William Smallbone and Jake Voskin scored for them against Huddersfield Town. And of course, Tranmere Rovers holding Watford as well. Bournemouth beating Luton by 4-0. Portsmouth progressing, as are Manchester City. And of course, in the FA Cup yesterday, West Brom booking their place in the fourth round. Middlesbrough holding Tottenham to a draw. QPR once again scored 11 goals in their past two games. they've now beaten Swansea City by 5-1. Absolute confidence. Jordan Hugill, of course, former West Ham striker, he scored a brace there. Sheffield United overcoming the second non-league side, AFC Fylde, but credit to Fylde, they scored, of course, against the Premier League side, so I'm sure that they'll remember that. Northampton Town upsetting the odds. Of course, they're in League 2. They beat League 1 Burton by 4-2. Derby County beat Crystal Palace 1-0. Of course, there has been history made with refereeing, as for the first time in English football, a referee actually went to the touchline to look at his screen, his monitor, to decide whether Milivojevic got a sending off. Of course, West Ham beating Gillingham by 2-0. Liverpool 1, Everton 0. The fourth round draw is on tonight in about an hour and a half's time. And of course, Arsenal against Leeds is on as well. So we'll see how that goes on. But the big stories in Europe, of course, is Zlatan Ibrahimovic, of course, came back to AC Milan, and he made his comeback in a game. Of course, he was come off the bench, so well done to him. Hopefully, I really want to see Zlatan scoring some goals, because Milan are having a shocking season. I believe they're in the bottom half of the Serie A, and this club were Champions League finalists 13 years ago rather. So yeah, they should really be doing better. And Cristiano Ronaldo scoring his first ever hat-trick in the Serie A for Juventus as they beat Cagliari 4-0. But that is it then, guys, for this episode of the Chris Talks Football Podcast. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you did, of course, leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And as always, I will see you guys next week.